It's been under a century since World War II came to an end, but the changes the conflict brought to modern society will be felt throughout human history. Without the horrors and innovations to come about during that era, would the world be the same? The beginning of World War II is marked by the German invasion of Poland in 1939, but the aggressive ambitions of the Nazis were apparent well before that. The 1938 occupation of Austria and annexation of Czechoslovakia sparked fears of a new European conflict well within living memory of the First World War. Determined to avoid such a war, Britain and France infamously pursued a policy of appeasement, condoning the annexation of the Sudetenland, which was a German-speaking Czechoslovak territory. As Mark Grimsley argued in World War II magazine, this occupation was crucial to German rearmament ahead of the war. Germany's military leaders did not universally accept Hitler's determination to seize the Sudetenland as sound judgment. Although plans were in place should Britain and France hold firm, Germany was ill-prepared for war in 1938, and elements of its military were deeply uneasy with Adolf Hitler and Nazism.
On the 3rd of September 1939, Britain declared war on Germany, beginning almost 6 years of conflict.
Notably, Lieutenant Colonel Hans Oster spearheaded a plan to use an anticipated invasion of Czechoslovakia as justification for a coup. This act would see Hitler killed, and according to Terry Parsons' The Oster Conspiracy of 1938, the German monarchy would be restored and paired with a British-style parliamentary system. According to the Washington Post, it's unclear whether the conspiracy was well planned, as key generals hadn't fully endorsed it. But had Oster and his men been prepared, and had appeasement not robbed them of their pretext, Nazi leadership would have been neutralized, the march to Poland would have been arrested, and Germany could have become a constitutional monarchy. The 1-2 punch of the World Wars has been credited with finishing off the great European empires. The blood and treasure spent on World War I left the British Empire in particular swimming in debt. What's more, the conflict also energized subjugated peoples who fought for their colonial masters to move for autonomy and independence, a change that was only amplified by the Second World War. The cost of maintaining global empires was evident even before 1914, and by the 1930s, even a staunch imperialist like Winston Churchill had to reluctantly concede that Britain's empire could only survive a few generations more at most. Even so, 1939 saw Britain, France, Italy, and Japan's empires all still standing. The Soviet Union was ascending, and the United States had taken its place on the international stage. It was a world of multiple great powers, each with varying degrees of control over territory and manpower. Without World War II accelerating the decline of old world empires and the rise of America and Russia, such a world would likely have endured for some time. This alternate timeline may not have seen the independent states of India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and others emerge for years or decades, and the product of these transformations would have been different from what we know. What's more, a multipolar mid-20th century would hardly have been devoid of conflict. The national interest mused that Imperial Japan might have cultivated regional alliances to retain its holdings in Korea and China, and Germany may have still fought regional wars in Eastern Europe. Looking back on World War II, the national interest couldn't help but note the irony in Germany's fate compared to the Soviet Union's. The Nazis had looked upon Russia as a giant prize ripe for the taking, but when the dust settled, Germany was in ruins and Adolf Hitler was dead. What's more, under Joseph Stalin's leadership, the USSR seized territory and entered the post-war world as a great communist superpower vying with the United States for influence.
This is the world today.
The German resistance west of the Rhine is still crumbling, and American columns are racing deep into Germany.
Without the war, things could have gone very differently. After all, the emancipation of the proletariat ahead of a worldwide revolt was a primary reason for the Russian Revolution, and it failed to materialize. The Russia of the 1920s and 30s was one with intense ideological divisions among its leadership, and ended with Stalin's triumph. Government policies helped exacerbate famines that decimated the countryside, and industrialization efforts were marred by self-deception. While on the rise by the late 1930s, the Soviet Union was a deeply troubled state. Had Hitler been deposed in 1938, he never would have signed the non-aggressive pact with Stalin, and Russia would not have been in a position to absorb half of Poland. Without the war, the USSR also wouldn't have had the same groundwork that allowed it to extend its influence into Eastern Europe. Fears of communism in the West might even have led Britain and France into conflict with Russia, as they had already considered bombing Russian oil fields during the Winter War. And without the war decimating the rest of Europe, a multipolar power system might have endured, diluting Soviet influence in the mid-20th century. Franklin Delano Roosevelt spent the 1930s delivering on his New Deal after being swept into office by his promises to combat the Great Depression. And while his programs did alleviate the suffering caused by the economic downturn, the Depression was still with the world when the president sought an unprecedented third term in 1940. He used economic conditions and the specter of European war in an argument for stability in troubled times, and his personal popularity remained high. But there was considerable unease about shattering the two-term precedent, and without the war, Republican Wendell Willkie just might have eked out a win in 1940. Willkie was a businessman and former Democrat, and he stood on the liberal side of the Republican Party. While he harshly criticized the New Deal's economic facets and Roosevelt's rhetoric against the elite, he was an internationalist and civil rights advocate. Professor Samuel Zipp has argued that Willkie would have pushed for civil rights legislation in particular, and he also supported the social welfare component of the New Deal. The economic side of the New Deal, however, included reforms and economic guardrails that have helped prevent another depression and strengthen the labor movement. These may have been lost in a Willkie administration, and without World War II to fully mobilize the economy, the Great Depression may have lingered another few years. The horrors of World War II were accompanied by significant technological progress and a kickstart to burgeoning democratic and civil rights movements. Even major undertakings like the large-scale development of penicillin were a result of the war efforts, and a study of mustard gas led to a similar breakthrough in chemotherapy. We can trace modern microwaves to radar technology developed by the US Army, and of course, World War II ushered in the atomic age, for better or worse. All of these advancements in science and technology may well have come about without the Second World War, but without the driving force of that conflict, it might have been decades before they were available as part of daily life. And without the displacement of so much scientific talent caused by the war, they likely would have been developed in different places. In the socio-political realm, a world without World War II is likely a world without the Holocaust, and millions of Jewish people might have remained in Europe. World War II also helped motivate voters in Western Europe to empower social democratic parties, which in turn led to a dramatic rise in social welfare programs. Women's rights and civil rights gained a push from the war efforts, as did independence movements the world over. The advancement of such causes could have happened without the war, but progress may very well have been slower and reached through radically different means.